God, today is going to be a big day. American election today. I've got a list of news to go over first before we head into House of Commons, and then obviously question period. And then after question period is over, I'm going to end the stream, probably give it an hour or so, and then we will be live again, probably all day, covering the US election. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Now we can get into the Canadian stuff. It's under Section 46 of the Criminal Code of Canada. Hashtag foreign interference. Dude, I don't know about you guys, but I have started to like Kevin Vaughn more and more. He actually seems like he is the only one with a level head. But let's get into this.
Madam Speaker, we're back this evening to try to get to the truth behind why the Prime Minister, who once held NSICOP, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, in such high esteem, has suddenly changed his tune. The Prime Minister had once said he thought NSICOP was well suited to examine foreign interference in Canada's democracy and our democratic institutions, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Madam Speaker, what was the reason for the change in the Prime Minister's glowing support for NSICOP? What brought about this change? Could it have been a release of an NSICOP report that shed some light on the willingness of some members of the Liberal Party to accept political and financial benefits from foreign sources, most notably from agents of the Chinese government? Mr. Speaker, I had asked the Prime Minister if he still felt that, quote, Canadians need to have faith in their institutions and deserve answers and transparency, end quote. His words, Madam Speaker. Or had his party's Beijing masters intervened and indicated a need for reversal in that faith? In the reply to my question, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Public Safety had the audacity to suggest I was making things up. Madam Speaker, nothing could be further from the truth. And it's not me saying these things. The Minister knows that NSICOP, the Hogue Commission, even national media have done some deep digging to get to the bottom of foreign interference. Madam Speaker, the truth is, the Liberal government does not want what's been uncovered to come to light, and perhaps most importantly, it does not want Canadians to know about it. After all, if everything is going so well in the government's eyes, why is it that the Canadian people are still in the dark about the so-called 11? Why are these people not arrested? And
Cheers
why are
to
they
that.
not before
11
a court?
names.
Madam Speaker, there are laws in the Criminal Code that address treasonous acts. Section 46(2), C, D, and E, to be precise, sets out what constitutes the act of treason, and it's quite clear. Section 46(2) states that everyone commits treason who, in Canada, C, conspires with any person to commit high treason or to do anything mentioned in paragraph A. D, forms an intention to do anything that is high treason or that is mentioned in paragraph A and manifests that intention by an overt act. Or E, conspires with any person to do anything mentioned in paragraph B or forms an intention to do anything mentioned in paragraph B and manifests that intention by an overt act. Additionally, Madam Speaker, Section 46(4) notes that, quote, where it is treason to conspire with any person, the act of conspiring is an overt act of treason, end quote. So, Madam Speaker, how is it that those unnamed 11 people are able to evade our laws, our courts, and our justice system? Madam Speaker, who are these special 11 people benefiting from the Liberal government's tacit, if not implicit, protection? Why does Canada even have treason laws if the government of the day decides by itself to suspend the use of these laws? For some time now, Canada's democracy has been under attack by authoritarian regimes. And chief among these is the People's Republic of China. Madam Speaker, I hosted a press conference earlier today where I was joined by 3 leading experts on foreign interference. We wanted to address a question that many Canadians have been asking. Who are the parliamentarians who have been identified in that confidential NSICOP report? Madam Speaker, how can Canada have an election if Canadians don't know whether the people they're voting for has their best interests at heart? Some observers may also wonder if this government is serving another master. Now, nearly every opposition party leader has called for the names of the parliamentarians identified in the NSICOP report, but the Liberal government still refuses to do so. Why? So, Madam Speaker, my question to the Parliamentary Secretary is simple. Why won't this government come clean to Canadians and defend our democracy?
I personally think should be on more sidewalks. Something like this should be done more often. We have a Remembrance Day sidewalk, remembering the veterans and obviously people walking across it, showing some support to the troops, to the vets, and I am all for it. Like I said, this is what we need. We need more of this in our country. We have an interesting video here. Weekend mayhem in Toronto.
The chaos at Yonge and Dundas lasted for more than 2 hours before Toronto police came to disperse the crowd. In an email to City News, one witness told us he saw fireworks being launched from cars, heard car engines revving, and at least 400 people walking on Yonge Street while vehicles were attempting to get through. The witness adds the situation lasted for about 2 hours before he saw 3 police cars arrive and disperse the crowd. Another witness, Kevin, sent us a similar message saying there were massive crowds of people setting off fireworks until 2 a.m. and he says he spoke to police on scene who told him there weren't enough officers to safely make arrests.
Hundreds of people in the streets, if not possibly thousands, and they send 3 cop cars. They send 3 cruisers. Wow, talk about not enough police. Talk about defunding the police at its finest right here. Got another video, or not a video here, just a statement from Kevin Vong. The RCMP plans to go undercover online to trap violent extremists. So the RCMP is going to be probably setting up some sort of phishing program or phishing site, or they're going to start going after people who they deem to be violent extremists. Kevin Vong with the absolute annihilation here. How about the RCMP trap the violent extremists on our streets, literally glorifying terrorists and attacking religious institutions and targeting religious minorities first. It's insanity. We just saw a video, hundreds of people doing whatever the fuck they wanted in Yonge Street with no ifs, ands, or buts. It's actually wild. Not enough officers to make arrests. Yeah, literally. Not enough officers to do anything, I guess. Talking about, violent extremists, I guess. Gangs carrying swords patrol the streets of Brampton. What the fuck is going on in Brampton? What is going on here, dude? So if you haven't been keeping up for like the past 3 to 4 days, the Sikhs and Hindus and the Khalistanis have pretty much all just been fighting for like the past 4 days. Literal, I hate to say it, I hate to sound like Tim Pool. I said this in my video and I'll say it again. I hate to say it, but more or less civil war, for lack of a better term. Indian civil war breaking out in the streets of Canada. What would happen and be happening over in India has now bled over into Canada. And it is just insanity. Look at the size of the swords these men are carrying. These are not just tiny little knives, and even then that would still be shocking. These guys are carrying like scimitars, essentially, just walking around the streets of what I would assume was Brampton, they said. Yeah, so just crazy, just wild stuff happening here. This is what the Liberal government has allowed to happen. The police aren't even doing anything about it. Like, look at these guys. There's 2 officers. And based on the video from before in Yonge Street, they said they didn't have enough police to make arrests there, so I could pretty much put 2 and 2 together here and say the same thing.
Questions orales, all questions, l'honorable.
Question period!
Leader of the opposition.
AKA Greg period.
Just 80 days after becoming Prime Minister, Stephen Harper promised to put an end to, or managed to put an end to, tariffs on softwood lumber. But this Prime Minister caved in and allowed Donald Trump to reimpose those tariffs, and Mr. Biden doubled them. Stephen Harper entered into a deal with Barack Obama in order to avoid the consequences of the Buy America Act. Can we have an election so that Canadians could have a prime minister who will stand up for Canadians?
Obama? Oh my God.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, what we see once again is the Conservative leader saying anything and everything while we stand up against Donald Trump. We stood up against him when he wanted to renegotiate NAFTA. And it was the Conservatives, including Stephen Harper, who were encouraging us to back down and not offend the Americans. On the contrary, we stood up for ourselves. We protected supply management. We protected steel and aluminum workers. We protected Canadian jobs all across this country, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. This Liberal Prime Minister not only capitulated to Obama, Trump, and Biden, he also gave $500 million worth of investment that left this country, impoverishing Canadians in the process. 10 years ago, the New York Times said life in Canada has the wealthiest middle class in the world. And Canada seems to be outstripping even the U.S. Today, it's the opposite. Canadians are poorer than Americans. Why is this Prime Minister creating jobs for Americans? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the opposition leader continues to claim that Canada's broken, but at the same time, he wants to get rid of the investments that will help Canadians, for example, with the construction of new homes. The millions of dollars that we've sent to the government of Quebec to build new affordable housing, if it was up to him, he would cut and impose austerity on Quebecers and all Canadians. They don't want that. We don't want that. We need to invest to help alleviate the housing crisis, and that not the kind of policies the opposition leader is proposing.
Minister Stephen Harper only 80 days to get a softwood lumber deal that put an end to the tariffs and reimbursed what were already collected. And then this Liberal Prime Minister capitulated, allowed Trump to reimpose the tariffs and Biden to double them. Harper got us an exemption to Buy America. This Prime Minister then capitulated, allowed Trump and Biden to reimpose them, hurting our construction workers and our providers of steel. Why can't we have a carbon tax election so that we can have a Prime Minister that no longer capitulates to the Americans, but instead will stand up for Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, since I just answered that question in French, allow me instead to take a moment to condemn unequivocally the violence we've seen in South Asian communities across the country over the past few nights. Let me be very, very clear. The individuals who are inciting violence and division and hatred in no way represent either the Sikh community or the Hindu community in Canada. At a time of Diwali, Bandi Chor Divas, we're seeing communities come together to celebrate their diversity and their strength.
Oh, they're coming together and they're fighting. That's what they're doing.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The New York Times 10 years ago. Life in Canada, home of the world's most affluent middle class. Median income in Canada appears to have surpassed median income in the United States. Oh, what a decade can do. Now, American workers make almost $20,000 more than their Canadian counterparts. They get twice as much investment every single year. The gap between our per capita GDP and that of the United States is now the worst in a century after this Prime Minister's rising taxes, bureaucracy, and blocking of energy projects. I know why Harris and Trump want to create jobs for Americans, but why does this Prime Minister want to help them?
Jake, that is happening in Canada. It sounds like it's from a foreign country, but believe it or not, it's happening here.
Speaker, the silence of the Conservative leader is deafening when it comes to what's happening in the South Asian communities right now. And it's a real shame. Not only is he not stepping forward to talk about how all Canadians must stand together and all South Asian Canadians, Sikh, Hindu, Jain, Buddhist, are celebrating together this weekend, but he even refuses to take the issue seriously enough to get the security clearance necessary to be briefed on threats to Canada and to Canadians. That's not leadership, Mr. Speaker.
I was wondering how long it would take for Trudeau to mention the security clearance.
Leader of the opposition.
It's like a drinking game.
Now you know his real agenda. He wants to distract from all the economic misery he's called at home. And so he uses divisions here at home. These divisions are the result of him. Under his leadership, we've seen a 251% increase in hate crimes, fire bombings of synagogues, bullets shot at Jewish children's schools, 100 churches burned and vandalized, and now we see sectarian riots on the streets of Brampton. This never happened before this Prime Minister. Does he take ownership for the divisions he's caused and the violence that has resulted?
Order.
Uh-oh.
Colleagues,
Colleagues.
I'm going to ask members, please, especially members from the far end of the House, to please not take the floor unless they are recognized by the Speaker. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, people watching that last answer will know and note the assuredness with which the Leader of the Opposition declared all the causes and the sources of the terrible violence we're seeing, when the reality is he refuses to take the necessary briefings that our security agencies are offering him to understand the threats to Canada. Why won't he get the security?
Oh, this is rough. This is brutal. Trudeau has nothing to say, zero accountability for the actions he has taken. Uh-oh, Greg is going to lay the smackdown.
Colleagues, it does not do well when on one side of the House is asked to keep quiet. The other sides of the House should do the same. All members should do the same.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the government has tabled regulations to cap greenhouse gas emissions. It's a bit complacent because the deadlines are long, extremely long, and it's Quebecers and Canadians who are paying the price. This is going to give polluters a holiday on emissions control, and this regulation may appear inadequate given the oil and gas lobby here in the House. Could this not be better done through statute? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we have always chosen to do everything that's necessary to reduce emissions, to protect Canadian prosperity, and to protect Canadians' future. That's why we're moving ahead with a cap on greenhouse gas emissions coming from the oil industry. This is an industry that is making record profits, an industry that already has the technology to reduce emissions, but with this cap, the industry will have to invest to reduce emissions so that everyone does their fair share in reducing emissions and protecting the planet. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Instead of considering...
Yes, I was quite shocked Trudeau actually showed up today. It was in his itinerary.
...or green banking or funding of green technology, as the Bloc has been advocating for a long time. The Prime Minister himself has said that this is an industry whose profits have skyrocketed since the pandemic. Instead of imposing standards that aren't tough enough, why doesn't he impose tougher standards? And that way he could go before the electorate finally with a bold record on the environment. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I know full well that both the Bloc and we have the same opinion on this. No industry should be allowed to pollute without limit. That's why we've put a cap on greenhouse gas emissions in the oil and gas industry. That industry contributes almost 1/3 of Canada's annual emissions. And so that industry has a greater capacity to reduce our emissions. They're making record profits, so we agree that they should reinvest in technologies that will help reduce emissions and help them do their fair share.
Honourable member from Burnaby South.
Who here doesn't have a family doctor? Well,
it's
5 million
Jagmeet.
Canadians don't. Now, Loblaws owns Maple, and a family doctor working at Maples will charge you $80 a month per person to see a doctor. Now, things are gotten so bad, this is predatory. The Prime Minister lets you down, and then Galen Weston swoops in to profit off it. Why is this Prime Minister letting Galen Weston profit off of people's pain?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize that it is the provincial area of jurisdiction to deliver health care in this country, but it is the federal responsibility to make sure that that health care remains public and universal and single payer. And that is exactly what we're doing by investing a record $200 billion in health care over the coming years that will oblige the provinces to invest in public health care, to hire more doctors, particularly family doctors, to reduce wait times and to improve their mental health services. These are things that Canadians expect, including the federal government expecting it of the provinces.
L'honorable député de Burnaby Sud.
The honourable member for Burnaby South. Private health care is a jungle. It could cost $213 for a minor emergency. It's so profitable that real estate investors are opening private clinics. And the Prime Minister...
The Crime Minister.
is...
I like that. It's a good one.
Will the Prime Minister finally stand up and put an end to all of this? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, unlike the NDP, we understand and respect the fact that the delivery of health care comes under provincial jurisdiction. But the federal government is responsible for ensuring that our healthcare system remains public, and the federal government has to be there to help with the funding. That's why we've put on the table $200 billion in investments for the next 10 years, which will allow for the hiring of more family doctors, reducing wait times, more support for mental health and workers in the system. And that's what all Canadians expect.
The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
This Liberal NDP Prime Minister presides over the worst GDP per person growth since the Great Depression. And it's no surprise. His high taxes and woke policies like carbon tax scams, job-killing capital gains tax hikes, and oil and gas cap have made Canadians poorer. In fact, U.S. GDP grew 2.8% as Canadians' GDP per person declined for 2 years, driving out business, investment, and jobs. Will this Prime Minister axe the tax hikes that make Canadians poorer?